I just had to use this recent content drop from the developers of Ghosts of Tabor as the intro to this video, because firstly, it's just hot. I mean, oh. And secondly, that Captain Price reference at the beginning. Beautiful. But that aside, I want to talk to you today about Ghosts of Tabor and their plans to incorporate a competitive game mode into the game, and how they've already struck a deal with the VREL, or the Virtual Reality Esports League, which is a relatively new esports league focused around VR. Now you might be thinking to yourself, what does esports and a competitive league have to do with a raid style looter shooter? And I'll be honest with you, I'm kind of thinking the same thing. That being said though, I do feel like if you remove the competitive moniker from the start, any additional game mode in any game is just an excellent idea. It gives players another way to interact with that game. And in the case of Ghosts of Tabor, as it's trying to strive to be similar to Escape from Tarkov, being able to play the game in a relatively risk-free manner without having to risk the gear that you've accumulated over several raids is always a nice thing. It also means that newer players who purchase the game further into its lifespan have the opportunity to improve upon themselves and get their core mechanics down without just getting repeatedly stomped every single raid by players who've just got significantly better gear and have a broader and more in-depth understanding of the game as a whole. Obviously, that doesn't mitigate the fact that newer players won't have the same level of gear as older players, but you know, being able to shoot in a straight line is more important to me than having the best guns. You never know though, playing in these lobbies might grant you XP, we don't know yet. So maybe it will be a good way for newer players to scale up their character faster before they then eventually drop into the base game and participate in raids with other players. Now, if you then reattach the concept of competitive into it, it basically means that players who have spent all their time perfecting their skill at the game are able to display that in a competitive arena for the world to see. Now, not much has been written or outlined on how a competitive game mode will exist in Ghosts of Tabor. However, Scott, the guy who owns Combat Waffle Studios, was a guest on a podcast called Jungle VR, where he outlined some interesting points on what they want as a competitive game mode in Ghosts of Tabor.
What exactly do you plan on doing competitively? Like, how is this going to fit in VREL's kind of mainframe of competitive play? Like, how are you going to run tournaments? How will getting first place look like? Or is it just going to be individual, team, just kind of who's got the most leaderboard for a expenditure of time?
No, I'll give you, I don't know if you ever played a game called Hunt Showdown.
No, I've never heard of Hunt Showdown.
Hunt Showdown. If you look into its multiplayer and the way it works and its competitive scene, I'm a huge fan. Actually, all of our developers are a huge fan. We've had a lot of meetings about how we're going to implement a style of battle royale, but we didn't want to do the traditional shrinking zone and circle, and we wanted to make it something that VR hasn't seen yet. So we looked at Hunt Showdown really hard, and we made a lot of changes that would fit better in VR. But yeah, we were definitely planning a battle royale style, 4v4. You get start. This is all we just talked about. This isn't set in stone.
I heavily suggest that you watch the entire podcast. It's really interesting, and you get a lot of really cool information from Scott about the vision of the game overall. So what Scott is talking about is the quick play game mode that is present in Hunt Showdown. For those of you who don't know what Hunt Showdown is, it's basically a looter shooter type of game similar to Escape from Tarkov. However, it's set in the 19th century in the bayous of the southern US. You play as unique hunters, which you are able to recruit, and after a certain milestone or level cap, if the hunter dies in a raid, you will lose them forever. The quick play game mode that Scott is referencing, up to 12 players will play in a relatively fast-paced battle royale inspired game mode, where they need to discover and defend what is called the Wellspring against other hunters. The game mode provides them with a free hunter that they can use, and they'll be given a random weapon at the start of the game. Players will spawn randomly on the map, and they need to effectively just loot as much gear as they can in order to have as best of a chance they can at winning the game. There's lots of lore surrounding like the hunters, basically they're damned, so the only way to save the hunter is by stepping into the wellspring and absorbing all its power. However, when you find the wellspring and you activate it, your position gets broadcasted to all the remaining hunters in the game. So then what they'll do is they'll naturally gravitate to where your position is and then try and kill you, because then all the progress that you've made so far will get transferred to them if they kill you. The person who is left alive or who absorbs all of the wellspring power will then be able to save their hunter and recruit them to play in raids. It's actually a really interesting take on the Battle Royale style, as it doesn't rely on players being forced together by a closing ring. Instead, the only way to win the game is by absorbing all the wellspring's power, so players are naturally gravitated towards a particular position on the map. Another nice thing is that you don't just parachute into a map, you just get spawned randomly, which means that you kind of have to find your bearings and then start making progress from there first, rather than just having a designated spot that you're going to land in. And obviously at the end of the game you get a free hunter which you can use, which is really cool. It's a nice reward, and to me better than just earning gold coins that you can use to buy skins. Obviously, with the fact that Ghosts of Tabor is being developed in VR, and I suspect you'll be able to create a character that you are going to embody, I suspect they're not going to have it so that you get another character that you can bring into a raid which is disposable, if you know what I mean. I actually posed this question to Scott on Discord and asked the question, one of the things I love about Hunt Showdown is that you get to keep the hunter that you take into the bayou. Do you anticipate having a similar kind of reward mechanic, maybe not an avatar but a special patch or vanity item that shows your proficiency in the arena? Or do you imagine having the players earn progression points or XP towards the character development / headquarters development? Scott's reply. Really, the idea is there, and I'd like to see a CSGO / Valorant style ranking systems for player in the comp side of it. But we also plan on expanding the available stats to users compared to other VR games like Pavlov or Contractors. But that's all I can say right now. His answers actually really excited me, because one of the things I love about competitive games is that dopamine hit you get from raising your rank. And in some games like Valorant, Counter-Strike and Rainbow Six Siege, that's literally the only form of game progression you have. There's no story modes or additional content to provide you with any form of satisfaction, either through completing all of the single player missions on all difficulties or grinding for those trophies / achievements. In VR, we've got a couple of competitive shooters. However, in most of them, the concept of a rank is vacant. If I take Onward as an example, you have standard lobbies and competitive lobbies. However, players have free choice on what lobby they want to join, because it's not decided for them by the game itself. They have free access to their lobby list, which means that effectively anyone can play with anyone. Now that's no bad thing necessarily. However, it does mean that if you go into a competitive lobby in Onward, the likelihood is you will be playing against players who have literally only just picked up and installed the game. This is usually because the competitive lobbies are very full, because that's where people want to be. This in turn means that people will move to be playing in the VRML or IVRL in order to have a ranking system that is aligned with their actual skill. But this then in turn means that these VR eSport leagues are being used effectively as glorified ranking systems rather than just a collective of the best players in the world at that game. I could probably talk about the state of VR esports at length, which might be a good video topic. Let me know if you'd like to see that, but I'm going to divert away from this now. It also seems like there might be some form of reward system that they're going to give you, which is really interesting. I'd be interested to see what that reward is, of course, whether it is just like vanity items or whether they do actually grant you XP. Reading that they want to introduce player stats into the game as well is really nice, because that is another thing that's just generally missing from a lot of the competitive VR shooters that we have today. At the end of the day, we all know that the most important thing in any gamer's portfolio is their KDR. It's the main source of clout that they have available to them, and it's basically part of the mating ritual for gamers to discuss it at length with their peers. But yeah, All of that is really cool, and I thank Scott for telling me that, because he doesn't have to respond to some random weirdo who randomly sends him messages. But that is basically all the information that we currently have on any form of additional game mode, whether it be competitive or not, from the developer. And granted, it isn't fully set in stone. However, I do genuinely hope they incorporate this into the game at launch, as I'd love to cover it. Mostly because I genuinely believe that the Battle Royale genre should just be left alone to die. But Hunt Showdown does it really well, actually, and I'd be very intrigued to see how Combat Waffle are going to approach it with Ghosts of Tabor. Now, the last bit I wanted to talk about was the exclusive partnership that Combat Waffle have struck with VREL. Found it really interesting that they've already struck a deal with a league and effectively promote the game as a competitive esport. At first it seems weird, however after doing some additional research it actually makes a lot of sense. The VREL and Combat Waffle Studios have very close ties with each other. One, because they've got similar investors, and there's actually quite a lot of crossover of staff. Scott, for instance, is a director for the VREL and the owner of Combat Waffle Studios, so in theory it's really a case of just keeping it in the family, for use of better terms. If one is performing well, it can promote the other and vice versa. That being said though, I was intrigued by the idea of another league in the VR space, and with my incessant need for information, specifically surrounding what makes a league different from the others, more established ones, specifically like the VRML or the VR Master League, I did what any normal person does. I hopped onto Discord, trawled through the list of users until I found someone who had a community manager tag and blindly DM'd them. Thankfully, he actually responded to me and was willing to answer my questions, so I thought I'd just put them here for you to see as well. So question 1, I may be totally wrong, but it seems that the VREL is a new league on the esports scene for VR. And I was hoping that you could tell me what separates the VREL from more established leagues such as the VR Master League and the IVRL. Answer. VREL is new in the sense that we're currently running our first season as a testing phase for our larger launch coming at the conclusion of the Contractors tournament that is currently live. We are creating, maintaining and operating a league with a far larger scope than other leagues, and we have the capacity and skill to deliver on these items. More importantly, we will make them last by implementing the foundations required for a positive community growth and competitive engagements. And that's a really interesting answer, because it's basically saying that what they want to do is focus on the community first and listen to the community, rather than doing what a lot of the other leagues are doing at the moment, where they're not necessarily listening and they're serving their own interests first and then listening to the community second. And in a way, the fact that he even responded to me is them proving the point that they want to have that engagement with the community and build those foundations. The second question I posed to him was, the VR esports leagues are all still fairly small, with fairly low public interest, likely due to a subpar marketing strategy. How does the VREL plan to overcome these barriers and open up VR esports to a larger audience than we're seeing now? The answer I got back was, that's an interesting question. Gaming and esports is trending upwards, and the technology is becoming more accessible to people across the globe. The metric for esports viewership for 2020 was around 451 million individuals, and it's exponentially growing. It's projected to run as high as 650 to 700 million viewers by 2025. As we saw in COVID as well, people began deriving pleasure/excitement from engaging with tech that they never had the chance to use due to time constraints, namely VR. And as a result, the sales for gaming devices skyrocketed. The byproduct of that being higher engagement metrics across the board for playing and viewing video games. Beyond this, we're well beyond the threshold of VR and esports being part of popular culture. This alone implies that esports and the usage of tech to game is growing on its own right, because society has already adopted it for use in general sense. There is utility within VR that goes beyond gaming that only helps the space grow. Now, firstly, I'd like to thank the community manager, like I'm thanking Scott. He took the time to read through my badly worded questions and answer them in a really helpful and eloquent fashion. And his final comments to me at the end of the day are very true. Esports in VR is trending upwards. We have more people in the medium than ever before. The fact of the matter is, when it comes to viewership of VR content, is that no one has tapped it correctly. The level of production that goes into a lot of VR leagues is subpar in comparison to a lot of other esports leagues, even at an amateur level. One of the most engaging VR esport videos that's available on the internet is the Globocamp versus Beginners Onward final match from 2018. Having the level production quality that was available to the league, which was the VR league, doesn't exist anymore from my understanding. It made it more engaging for the viewers, especially with the bad spectator tools available within Onward. If the VREL is able to reach this barrier and give viewers a good, engaging experience in their leagues, I can imagine them doing very well. But time will tell on that. This actually moves me on to a nice segue into what I would actually like to see in Ghosts of Tabor from the get-go, especially from a content creator / caster perspective. Firstly, I would love for there to be casual and ranked lobbies, where the ranked lobbies are skill-based and assign some form of accolade to your character based upon their skill and performance in the mode, whereas casual is just whoever joins the lobby, basically how most games work. And that sounds like what they want to do with it anyway. Secondly, to be able to queue up for a lobby and be able to continue doing stuff around your headquarters whilst you wait for it to populate. There's nothing I hate more than joining or queuing up to join a lobby and waiting 10-15 minutes for it to populate because you've gotten to a level where there's very few players at your bracket. And lastly, live integration. Veil is doing this in this game, and Veil is an upcoming free-to-play competitive VR shooter, and I think it would be an amazing thing to have this technology in Ghosts of Tabor. It makes creating content in VR easier, it makes the viewing experience more streamlined, and it makes casting matches much easier. Overall, it's just a great thing, and I hope to God that they introduce it. But that aside, that's it for me. I hope you've enjoyed this video and you found it interesting. And if you have any ideas, please dump them into the comment section. I'm really interested to hear your thoughts and opinions on the subject. Other than that, if you've liked the video, consider subscribing. It's totally up to you, and I'm not going to force you, mostly because I don't know where you live, and it's quite difficult to obtain firearms in the UK. Anyway, that's it for me. Ciao.